kidnapped by Islamic militants who may have just become a little bit more difficult. A U.S. military team scheduled to arrive in Nigeria tomorrow to help locate the girls whose captors are now threatening to sell them. Our Pentagon correspondent Barbara Starr is working her sources. What are you picking up, Barbara?
Well, Wolf, U.S. officials are telling us they now have good reason to believe that this is about to get much more complicated, that at least some of the girls have been split up into smaller groups. And of course, that means possibly moved across international borders in Africa, which are vague borders at best. That is going to make it very difficult. A small U.S. military team scheduled to land in Nigeria tomorrow. They will join up with other U.S. personnel already working on this out of the embassy, military personnel, law enforcement, and intelligence. But if the girls are split up into small groups, this becomes a massive intelligence problem. How do you find them? How do you find where they're being held? How do you go after their captors all at the same time? We've talked about this. You have to have simultaneous raids, because if you do not do this all at once in multiple locations that you don't know where they are yet, that gives Boko Haram warning that the Nigerians are coming after them. The U.S. is talking to Nigeria now about using drones to try and take those beginning steps to track down Boko Haram. Wolf?
Barbara, stand by. I want to bring in our national security analyst, Peter Bergen. Mohammed Jamjoom is still with us in New York as well. Does the U.S., based on everything you know over the years, have a good handle on this Boko Haram, this terrorist organization?
I think the short answer is no, but I don't think anybody had a good handle on it. You know, it was so murky. Don't forget that they haven't tried to attack an American target. There was a debate within the administration about whether to designate them as a foreign terrorist organization. And the fact is that they certainly threatened the United States verbally, but they hadn't operationalized any of that. And so, I think it's a group that is, difficult to decipher. And, it's only recently that the State Department designated as a foreign terrorist organization.
November of last year. Barbara, I've been told that this group apparently relishes all the attention it's getting lately. It's sort of emboldened by it at the same time. That's a problem, because they could go out there and kidnap a whole bunch more girls.
Well, I mean, our own CNN personnel in Nigeria have been reporting for days now how precarious this security situation is. And in the north of Nigeria, where this has been happening, there virtually is no security. We saw that Boko Haram went into a village and has killed 300 more people. This is just terrible what these Nigerians, civilians, are putting up with. It is going to be a trade-off. Boko Haram may relish the publicity, but the international pressure could turn so much heat on them that it is possible it may give the Nigerian government the tools to really go after them. But the Nigerian government's going to have to make that critical decision that it really wants to do that. And so far, there's a lot of evidence that the Nigerians haven't done it as aggressively as they could, Wolf.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Let's get back to the breaking news. Sources telling CNN the more than 200 schoolgirls kidnapped by Islamic militants in Nigeria have now been split up, making a possible rescue operation a whole lot more difficult. And Lisa Monaco is joining us from the White House right now. She's the Assistant to the President for Homeland Security and Counterterrorism. Lisa, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Wolf.
What can the United States do right now to free those girls, more than 200 schoolgirls in Nigeria?
Well, as you know, Wolf, this is an absolutely tragic and outrageous situation that's happened in Nigeria, and our hearts go out to the families, and the President and the First Lady's thoughts and prayers are with the families and the parents of these more than 200 girls who've been abducted. What the U.S. government is doing right now is deploying a team of experts from across our government to do everything we can at the President's direction to help the Nigerians find and safely return these girls to their families.
How many Americans are being deployed over there?
Well, we're in the process of adding to a team that we currently have on the ground in our embassy, Wolf. At least a dozen folks will be on the ground shortly. These are military, law enforcement, intelligence experts, and also experts in victim assistance to help the families and hopefully the girls, when they return, cope with this.
We've heard our Barbara Starr reporting from the Pentagon, these girls have been separated. They're in smaller groups right now. Have you heard that? I assume you have.
Well, Wolf, I'm aware of those reports, as you know, what we are doing is making sure that we are considering every possibility, and we've got to be concerned with exactly that type of potential movement if it is in fact the case. There's very porous borders in this region, very heavily forested and remote and vast area, so we've got to be concerned about that.
So what does this Boko Haram group want? Do they want money? Do they want ransom? Do they just want to sell off these girls? What do they want?
Well, Wolf, this is a terrorist group that has committed brutal, brutal acts for a number of years now. We're talking about suicide bombings, attacks on churches and mosques, and now the systematic and targeted kidnapping of women and girls to include potentially selling them into slavery and trafficking. And this is something that has escalated. This is a group that has been responsible for thousands of deaths, indeed more than 1,000 just this year alone. So their motivation is really terror, Wolf.
You know, which raises the question, 2 years ago, you were among those in the government who recommended that the State Department formally designate Boko Haram as a foreign terrorist organization. The CIA wanted the State Department to do it, the FBI. You did over at Justice, but for some reason the State Department rejected that advice. The Secretary of State at the time was Hillary Clinton. What was their thinking? Was that a major blunder on the part of the State Department?
No, Wolf. Look, there's a process that this government, our government, goes in and goes through to designate a foreign terrorist organization, and we have in fact done that, and we did that last year after a deliberate process.
But it wasn't until November, Lisa. That's long after this group started wiping out UN facilities and killing all these people. This has been a terrorist group for a number of years, as you well know.
That's right, Wolf, but I think it's important to remember that before we designated the group as a whole, there were a number of individuals, indeed key leaders of Boko Haram, that we did designate as terrorists using the authority that this government has. Designations are one tool among a whole host of tools that we use to combat terrorist groups, and most importantly, to work with the Nigerian government in order to help them bring this fight to Boko Haram.
If the U.S. government, as you had recommended, had designated this group as a foreign terrorist organization, would it have made a difference potentially as far as these 200 or nearly 300 girls are concerned? In other words, would the U.S. have been able to do something on the ground to prevent this kind of brutality?
I'm not going to speculate about what might have happened had a designation happened earlier. Again, we designated leaders of the group, but certainly the designation was not a factor in the assistance that we've been providing for years to the Nigerian government to help professionalize their military, to help provide them law enforcement and investigative assistance, to help indeed provide economic and development assistance, which is also crucial to a secure and stable government to help them address the terrorist threat that Boko Haram presents, not just now in Nigeria, Wolf, but regionally. This is a regional problem that we're facing.
What is the connection between Boko Haram and al-Qaeda?
Well, Wolf, we're concerned about that. What we've seen in the past is at least some funding from an al-Qaeda affiliate with which I think you're familiar, al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb. So we're very concerned about connections between what has heretofore been a relatively locally focused but extremely brutal group. And so we're always going to be concerned about their connections. And now we're concerned about them expanding beyond the Nigerian borders into neighboring countries.
One quick question on Yemen. I know you were there in March. It looks like the U.S. Embassy in Sana'a, the capital of Yemen, is on lockdown. There's a credible threat, apparently, to U.S. interest there. What's going on?
Well, Wolf, as you know, we have extremely capable, focused, dedicated, and brave people who serve in our posts all overseas, and particularly in posts like Yemen and elsewhere, where we are always concerned about the threat posed by a very determined enemy in AQAP. And so what we do is we focus on that threat reporting. We take prudent measures to protect our people. But these are folks who are serving diligently and bravely overseas, and we're very appreciative of it.
And we hope only that they are safe and sound. Lisa Monaco, the advisor to the president on counterterrorism, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks, Wolf.